We live in a society that glorifies relationships. From an early age, we are bombarded with the idea that finding our other half is essential for happiness. Movies, music, and even popular culture reinforce this romantic ideal, making us believe that solitude is a problem to be solved. But does this belief reflect reality? Or is it possible that many relationships actually become emotional prisons, sources of suffering and self-sabotage? Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychiatrist, offers a fascinating perspective on this issue. According to him, our journey toward individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, can be hindered when we blindly surrender to relationships that prevent us from growing. One of the core concepts of Jungian psychology is the shadow, all those repressed and denied aspects of our psyche. In relationships, we often project our shadow onto our partner. This means that what we refuse to accept in ourselves tends to be seen in the other, leading to constant conflict. For example, someone who does not recognize their own aggressiveness may end up with a partner who seems problematic or difficult. In reality, this person is merely reflecting what the other refuses to acknowledge about themselves. Instead of becoming aware of our own flaws, we use our partner as a scapegoat. This creates a vicious cycle of frustration, resentment, and arguments that often lead to the relationship's downfall. Jung believed that self-knowledge is the key to escaping these traps. When we are single, we have a unique opportunity to confront our shadow without external distractions. We can explore our emotions, fears, and desires authentically, without the need for validation or approval from someone else. Many people enter relationships not because they truly want to share their life with someone, but because they fear loneliness. This fear, however, is a reflection of their own inability to be with themselves. Philosopher Simone de Beauvoir wrote that romantic love often becomes a form of imprisonment, where people lose their own identity to fit into an idealized couple dynamic. When two people become emotionally dependent on each other, they move further away from their true essence. Jung believed that humans can only achieve wholeness when they learn to integrate all parts of their psyche, both light and shadow. To do this, a period of solitude is essential, allowing us to look inward and understand who we truly are. Many avoid solitude because it forces them to confront their own demons. But this is precisely the path to individuation, facing the deepest parts of ourselves without seeking external distractions. So, could being single actually be a blessing in disguise? The belief in romantic love as the solution to all problems is one of modernity's greatest illusions. From childhood, we are conditioned to believe that a romantic relationship will give meaning to our existence, save us from boredom, and complete us. But this exaggerated expectation inevitably leads to frustration. Carl Jung emphasized that no one can complete another person. The idea that there is a soulmate who will make us feel fully fulfilled is a dangerous myth because it places our happiness in someone else's hands. Instead of pursuing self-development, we expect our partner to fulfill our emotional needs, which inevitably leads to disappointment. Relationships can be a source of growth, but only when both individuals are already whole within themselves. The problem is that, in most cases, couples come together trying to fill an inner void with each other. This creates emotional dependency and suffering. Psychologist Esther Perel highlights that many modern relationships carry an unsustainable burden. We expect our partner to be our best friend, confidant, lover, motivator, and even therapist, all at once. Placing so many expectations on one person is a recipe for failure. Being single, on the other hand, allows each person to discover their own source of fulfillment. Instead of seeking wholeness in another, we learn to be enough for ourselves. This is a much more solid path to true happiness. One of the greatest benefits of being single is freedom. And not just the freedom to meet new people, but more importantly, the freedom to explore one's identity without compromise. When in a relationship, sacrifices are inevitable. We adjust our routines, compromise on our desires, and often set aside our own projects to maintain harmony. While this isn't necessarily bad, it can become an obstacle to personal growth. Solitude, when used wisely, is a powerful ally. Great spiritual masters and philosophers have always valued periods of isolation as essential for self-knowledge. Jung, for example, spent years in seclusion at his tower in Bollingen, reflecting on the human psyche and developing his theories. He understood that introspection is a crucial process for anyone seeking to understand their true nature. The modern world, however, pulls us away from introspection. We are constantly connected, always surrounded by external stimuli, and relationships are part of this overstimulation. Many people stay in relationships not out of love, but out of fear of emptiness. But what if, instead of fearing solitude, we embraced it? Being single gives us the opportunity to live fully, without restraints. It allows us to travel, move to new cities, invest in our projects without having to ask for permission or negotiate every decision. More than that, it provides the time and space needed for deep self-discovery. Codependency is a common phenomenon in many relationships. It's a dynamic where one person emotionally depends on the other to feel valid and secure. Instead of a healthy, balanced love, what develops is a relationship built on control and fear. Carl Jung warned about the dangers of losing oneself in another. He argued that when we project our unresolved needs onto a partner, we create a cycle of dependency that distances us from our true selves. It's common, for example, for someone who fears abandonment to get involved with emotionally unavailable people, reinforcing their belief that they are unworthy of love. Being single allows us to break these chains. Without a partner to project our insecurities onto, we are forced to confront our internal struggles. This process can be painful, but it is also liberating. It teaches us to take responsibility for our own happiness and to find joy in our own company. Melody Beattie, one of the leading voices on codependency, states that only when we learn to fully love ourselves can we love another in a healthy way. Singleness can be seen as a path to self-acceptance, a time to build a strong relationship with oneself. Individuation, a central concept in Jungian psychology, is the process by which a person becomes who they truly are. And often, this process requires periods of solitude. Being alone allows us to face our fears, question our beliefs, and explore our passions without interference. Existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre famously said, "Hell is other people," referring to the way we often shape our identities based on external expectations. In relationships, this pressure can be even stronger. We want to please, to be accepted, and in doing so, we suppress parts of ourselves that don't fit the mold of what we think is desirable. Being single, on the other hand, is an opportunity to dive deep into our unconscious, discover our true motivations, and reconcile our conflicting aspects. It's a time to cultivate hobbies, learn new skills, and expand our horizons. Jung believed that only when we are truly aware of who we are can we engage in authentic relationships with others. Otherwise, relationships become built on masks and unrealistic expectations. This doesn't mean that relationships are inherently bad. Perhaps the real question isn't about being single or committed, but about being conscious. Relationships can be wonderful when based on respect and freedom. However, if they cross into the territory of possession, control, and dependency, they become toxic. It's important to ask, do we want a partner because we genuinely love them, or because we fear facing life alone? Being single can be an act of courage, a time for self-reconstruction, self-discovery, and perhaps one day, the ability to engage in a more mature and fulfilling relationship. After all, we can only offer others what we have already found within ourselves. Shall we explore this further? Modern society often associates being single with loneliness and unhappiness, as if not having a partner were a state of deficiency or incompleteness. However, this perspective ignores a fundamental truth. Solitude can be a source of self-sufficiency and fulfillment. Carl Jung argued that the true meaning of life lies in the inner journey, the process of individuation. And this journey is, more often than not, a solitary one. When we are single, we have the opportunity to experience the world without filters, without the need to please or conform to a partner's expectations. We can discover our preferences, develop our creativity, and connect with ourselves on a deeper level. Many of history's greatest minds spent significant portions of their lives alone, and it was in that state that they achieved their greatest breakthroughs. Nietzsche, for example, believed solitude was essential for developing original thought. He famously said, "Whoever cannot live alone only loves half of themselves in another." This brings up an important question. Do we seek relationships out of genuine desire, or are we simply afraid of facing our own company? If the answer is the latter, perhaps it's time to reassess our priorities. We live in a world that glorifies social life. Social media reinforces the idea that we need to be constantly surrounded by friends and partners to be happy. Solitude, on the other hand, is often seen as failure, as if being alone means there's something wrong with us. But this is a distorted view. Solitude does not mean isolation or sadness. On the contrary, it is in that space that we can delve into our thoughts, reflect on our existence, and find true meaning in our lives. Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh teaches that true inner peace can only be found when we learn to appreciate solitude. In his words, "The individual who has learned to be alone will never be lonely." This means that before seeking someone to share life with, we must first learn to enjoy our own presence. Only when we are whole within ourselves can we share genuine love with another, free from unrealistic expectations or emotional dependency. Instead of viewing singleness as a condition imposed by circumstances, we can see it as a conscious choice. Being single can be a time of growth, a moment to invest in our dreams and passions without external distractions. This doesn't mean relationships should be avoided, but if we're going to enter one, it should be out of true desire, not to fill an internal void. When we become self-sufficient, any relationship that comes along will be a bonus, not a desperate need. Perhaps true freedom lies in exactly that, the ability to be happy alone, without needing a relationship to feel complete. So, have you ever stopped to ask yourself if you truly want a partner, or if you're just afraid to face yourself? Carl Jung once said, "What we deny in ourselves, we project onto others." This is especially evident in relationships. Often, we enter a relationship believing our partner will bring us happiness, but in reality, we are simply using that connection to escape our own internal struggles. Relationships can be powerful mirrors, reflecting our insecurities, fears, and repressed desires. However, if we are unaware of this, we risk falling into destructive cycles where we blame our partner for our own problems. This happens when we expect them to fill voids that only we can address. Think about how many relationships end in resentment and frustration. Most don't fall apart due to a lack of love, but because both partners project their shadows onto each other without realizing it. He demands more attention from her because he feels an internal void. She feels suffocated because she never learned to set boundaries, and so the love that once seemed perfect turns into an emotional prison. By choosing to be single, we give ourselves the opportunity to work through these issues without dragging someone else into the process. We learn to handle our emotions independently rather than outsourcing our happiness. As Jung emphasized, individuation can only happen when we turn inward, and solitude provides the necessary space for that journey. Society sells us the idea of happily ever after as the ultimate goal, but this view ignores the complexity of human relationships. Romantic love, as idealized in popular culture, creates unrealistic expectations that often lead to disappointment. Writer Bell Hooks, in her book All About Love, argues that most people don't know how to love in a healthy way because they've never learned to love themselves. Instead of seeing love as an act of giving and mutual growth, many approach it as a need, something to chase in order to feel complete. This leads to relationships based on fear and attachment rather than genuine connection. By choosing singleness, we break free from this cultural dependency. We discover that love can exist in many forms, not just within the traditional romantic model. Fulfillment can be found in deep friendships, personal passions, and a greater sense of purpose. True love does not have to be confined to a single romantic relationship. Opting to be single does not mean living in isolation. On the contrary, many single people cultivate more meaningful relationships because they are not bound by the demands of a romantic partnership. Without the pressure to please a partner, we can connect with others more authentically. We build deeper friendships, strengthen family bonds, and allow ourselves to explore the world without unnecessary emotional constraints. Jung believed that fulfillment comes from balancing our inner and outer worlds. Being single allows us to focus on this balance without distractions that pull us away from our personal journey. True love starts within us. If we don't learn to be happy alone, we will struggle to find happiness with someone else. Many people fear being single because they associate it with loneliness, but being single does not mean being alone. True loneliness is not the absence of company, it is the disconnection from oneself. Ironically, this disconnection often occurs within unfulfilling relationships. Carl Jung emphasized that the path to individuation requires periods of solitude, because only then can we truly hear our inner voice. In a world that constantly pushes us to interact, share, and seek validation, the ability to be self-sufficient becomes a superpower. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer compared human beings to porcupines in a harsh winter. If they get too close, they hurt each other with their quills, but if they move too far apart, they freeze. The key, he said, is finding the right distance. But this balance can only be achieved once we first learn to keep ourselves warm, without relying on someone else's presence. The problem is that many people enter relationships before developing emotional autonomy. They seek in others what they haven't found within themselves, and when the relationship fails, they feel lost because they never learned to be whole on their own. Being single, when embraced fully, strengthens self-sufficiency. It teaches that self-love is not an abstract concept, but a daily practice. When we become emotionally independent, we don't need a relationship to feel valued. We can choose to be with someone out of genuine love, not necessity. What does it mean to love truly? Many confuse love with possession, attachment, or emotional dependency. Jung saw love as a process of integrating the opposites within ourselves. He believed that we project onto our partners the aspects of our psyche that we have yet to develop, which is why so many relationships are marked by frustration and suffering. If we are not whole, we seek in others the parts we feel we lack. A person who lacks confidence may fall for someone decisive, hoping that trait will compensate for their insecurity. However, over time, the same trait that once seemed attractive may start to feel controlling. This means that true love does not seek to fill voids. It happens when two individuals, already complete within themselves, choose to share their journeys. A healthy relationship should not be an escape, but a space for mutual growth. And who is better prepared to grow in a relationship than someone who has already learned to grow alone? Society imposes the narrative that a happy ending must involve marriage, children, and a life shared as a couple. But this view ignores the fact that personal fulfillment can take many forms. Being single can be a phase or a lifestyle. For some, it will be a period of self-discovery before entering a more mature relationship. For others, it will be a permanent choice, a way to live with more freedom and authenticity. Neither option is better or worse. The real question is, are you living a life you truly want, or just following a script imposed by society? Many of history's most inspiring figures lived single lives or had unconventional relationships. Da Vinci, Nietzsche, Emily Dickinson, Nikola Tesla, all found purpose in their passions and creations, unbound by traditional relationship expectations. Singleness can be a journey of empowerment, a path to breaking free from emotional dependencies and discovering a happiness that depends on no one but yourself. And in the end, isn't that the greatest freedom we can achieve? The decision to remain single is often seen as a sign of failure or a lack of opportunities when, in reality, it can be one of the most liberating and conscious choices a person can make. The issue isn't being single, it's the way society teaches us to perceive it. From an early age, we are taught to follow a predetermined script. Grow up, find a partner, get married, have children, and grow old together. Those who don't follow this path are often labeled as incomplete or unsuccessful. But what if that script doesn't make sense for everyone? Carl Jung emphasized the importance of authenticity and the individual path. He believed that every human being has a unique purpose and that blindly following societal norms can lead to an empty and meaningless life. Individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, requires us to question these imposed narratives and ask ourselves, does this really make sense for me? Singleness, when chosen consciously, can be a state of fulfillment, not deprivation. It offers the freedom to explore life without compromise, to make decisions based on what we truly desire rather than what is expected of us. Before seeking an external relationship, we need to examine the relationship we have with ourselves. How do we handle our emotions? How do we deal with our insecurities and fears? If we can't live well on our own, why do we believe a partner will fix that for us? Jung teaches us that anything unresolved within us will eventually manifest in the external world. If we carry insecurity, jealousy, or fear, it's only a matter of time before these emotions emerge in a relationship. The solution is not to find someone to complete us, but to become whole on our own. Often, we look for things in a partner that we lack within ourselves: security, self-esteem, stability. But the truth is, no one can provide those things for us permanently. The only true source of security comes from within. Once we realize this, relationships stop being a necessity and become a genuine choice, a healthy exchange between two complete individuals. Why do so many people fear solitude? Because they have been conditioned to see being alone as a problem. But that fear is often not about the absence of company. It's about the fear of facing oneself. In the silence of solitude, we confront our deepest thoughts, our unfulfilled desires, our unresolved pain, our hidden truths. Constant companionship can serve as a distraction, an escape from dealing with these issues. But solitude, when embraced, is a gateway to self-discovery. It teaches us to be self-sufficient, to find joy in our own company, to become stronger and more confident. Nietzsche once said, "Solitude is to the spirit what fasting is to the body. It purifies us, strengthens us, and allows us to see life with greater clarity." If the only reason to enter a relationship is the fear of being alone, then perhaps embracing solitude first is the wiser choice. Because true love can only flourish when it is born out of freedom, not necessity. One of the greatest lessons of Jungian psychology is that we can only build healthy relationships when we stop using others as emotional crutches. Relationships based on the need for validation, security, or companionship often become prisons in disguise. But when we become self-sufficient, relationships stop being an escape and become a genuine choice. This means that if we ever decide to be with someone, it will be because we want to, not because we need to. Writer and psychoanalyst Clarissa Pinkola Estes, author of Women Who Run with the Wolves, warns about the danger of accepting small loves out of fear of solitude. Many people settle for lukewarm relationships, sacrificing essential parts of themselves just to avoid being alone. But these relationships don't strengthen us, they weaken us. True love only happens when both individuals are already whole. When two complete people meet, they share but do not demand. They grow together but do not imprison each other. And singleness can be the most powerful period to reach that level of emotional maturity. What does it mean to have a fulfilling life? Happiness isn't found in a relationship, nor in being single. It comes from living in alignment with who we truly are. For some, that might mean a strong, loving partnership. For others, it might mean a life of freedom, discovery, and personal growth. What matters isn't your relationship status, it's the awareness with which you choose to live. If a relationship limits you, drains you, or disconnects you from yourself, perhaps it isn't a healthy choice. And if singleness gives you space to grow, explore, and live more authentically, maybe it's a gift, not a problem to be solved. Jung said that the pursuit of individuation is the most important journey we can undertake. This process doesn't require us to be alone, but it does require us to be whole. And only those who are whole can truly surrender to love, without fear, without attachment, without illusions. So if you're single, see it not as a lack, but as an opportunity, a time to strengthen yourself, to build your life without compromises, to become the person you truly want to be. And who knows, maybe one day, true love will cross your path, not to complete you, but to walk beside you. Until then, why not embrace the freedom of being whole on your own?